the truth comes out, when the truth comes out, you can run, but you know it's ending.
Are you laughing at me? Because I stated the facts that hay causes malocclusion and hay, loose hay, fed at 80%, causes malnutrition. I mean, you're more than welcome to giggle it up there, little girl. But the fact of the matter is, my statements are backed by science. My statements are backed by actual facts. I don't know how many times we've had to go through this. This is just one source, just one. I have many. I have hundreds, actually. If you spend a minute or two on the channel, you will see all the evidence and all the research papers that are linked back. But the hay causing malocclusion and jaw malformation and misalignment comes from a 2020, they started in 2019, 2020, 2021, Balmer sister study that was testing the hardness and how hay is actually the most challenging, quote to quote the study, of feedstuffs. And they even in the study discuss how hay does not have a very good nutritional value. If you go to Feedopedia, which is kind of like the go-to because it's an agricultural institute's encyclopedia on feed, and start looking up like Timothy hay, which is what's suggested, and all the different types of hays, and what they do for rabbits and how their feed is for rabbits, they do not recommend them as a main ingredient for their feed sources. You can supplement to a degree, and you could thin out their feed to a degree, but everything else that they've found on hay also goes back to the fact that, you end up with poor weight gain. You end up with poor growth rates if you feed them primarily hay. You end up with malnutrition is what happens because hay alone, Timothy in particular, and grass hays do not supply rabbits with enough nutrients in order to properly maintain. In order for a rabbit to receive enough nutrients, they have to have a digestible material protein content of at least 16% in order to have a digestible energy, which is what they're actually able to absorb, of an absolute minimum 12%. Timothy hay and most hays digestible material, which should be the high number, is at best 9 to 14% for the most part. Now, alfalfa does a little bit better. You might be able to sustain a rabbit on alfalfa, but you still wouldn't be getting all the nutrients that they need without adding barley or oats or sunflower and a mineral packet of some sort so they can get the proper vitamin and mineral balance, as well as a few other things that should be put in there like probiotics, etc. And then you'd still need to add a little bit of sugar to that, proper carbohydrates, just to balance it out. I mean, going right here, there's an entire section on rabbit nutrition. This is written by Dr. T.E. Reed, who's a rabbit specialist and scientist, and nutrition is one of the things he does. Most of my studies go back to LaBosse, and then most of the rest of the information from this TikTok and other channels, including my website and the book that I'm writing, go back to multiple studies, including Cost 848, Recent Advances in Rabbit Nutrition, the Nutrition of the Rabbit Second Edition, which is a collection of another like 25 research papers that is, that plainly lays out, protein, carbs, what each individual study's findings were. Dr. T.E. Reed, this is a very straightforward quote. There is a vast difference in the nutritional qualities of hay depending on the type of hay, the quality of the forage prior to preparation, and the type and manner of the curing process. Now, remember when I said at best Timothy gets 9%, when at minimum they need 12%. At best, Timothy has 9% DM, which means that breaks down to maybe 6% DE, digestible energy, and even less than that, because if you go to Feedopedia, they'll explain to you that when a rabbit eats Timothy hay, because the fiber content is so high, they can maybe only get 30 to 40% of that, of the nutrition out of it. So in order for a rabbit to eat enough Timothy hay in a day to meet their nutritional requirements, they'd have to eat close to 25 pounds of Timothy a day to meet the nutritional requirements. That is how malnourished you end up being if you feed them 80% hay. The reason they're constantly eating it is because they're starving. And then there's another interesting section on the fiber content. Remember, you mentioned fiber. Your fiber should max with a rabbit diet at 16% protein at 20 to 22% max. If you're feeding 18%, you might be able to goose it to 24. But any fiber content higher than 25%, they were finding that the rabbits can no longer digest and absorb enough nutrients before it gets pushed out through the cecum and the digestive tract, and they can't even absorb it. It just gets pushed right through. Timothy hay is 30% fiber. 29 to 32% fiber is what the range is for Timothy hay. That means that your protein is way too low, your fiber is way too high. That's why the rabbits end up starving to death. Plus, you couple that with the fact that the chewing loose hay damages the jaw. That is where this is coming from. So you can take your little laughy smiley faces and say. So the question is, will feeding alfalfa cause calcium buildup? Feeding alfalfa to a rabbit will not cause calcium buildup in a healthy, well-bred rabbit. So this is where the confusion has been. And actually, Tarcourt Brown's paper goes back and and if you actually read it, the explanation is calcium sludge buildup happen in rabbits when they do not have a correct conformation. It happens because the skeletal structure is curved under, the back hips are pinched, and then what that does is that incorrect undercut is when the pelvis kind of goes under. Pinched is when the rear end is not wide enough, and it comes in, it literally pinches the base of the pelvic floor. When that happens, that also pinches their urethra. It makes it hard for them to properly evacuate normally. Rabbits actually need and are actually evolved to process high levels of calcium. They need the extra calcium in order to build strong bones. That's why you see so many pet rabbits on low calcium diets with brittle bones and broken legs. They need the high calcium to properly continue growing their teeth, because remember, both their top and bottom incisors, their teeth are constantly growing. They need that calcium. They need a good high calcium in order to produce enough milk to feed out their litters. So rabbits are actually made in order to process high calcium, and a normal rabbit that has good conformation, nice wide hips, that's properly put together, that's not undercut, that doesn't have that isn't poorly bred, has no issues expelling that extra calcium. In fact, that's quite a regular thing that they do, where it'll just go ahead and flush out. Where you see problems with calcium buildup, again, is with poorly bred, typically pet rabbits. And because those are bred by people who should not be breeding them, or they're not culled when they should be. Probably 90% of pet rabbits are culls. They should have never been bred in the first place, and they're not healthy enough in order to go out and live their lives. There's too many backyard breeders out there who go, oh, well, it's not good enough for whatever, or I'm just going to breed two things together willy-nilly and I don't show, so why would I care about conformation? Well, the reason you need to care about conformation is things as simple as, is my rabbit going to end up with bladder sludge and bladder issues and bladder infections and all these painful problems as it gets older, because I've literally bred it to be subpar quality, and that subpar quality rabbit has serious health effects attached to it. So that is the issue. The issue is not necessarily alfalfa or calcium, because again, going back to, this is what Harcourt Brown says, it's like they're found that it's actually a pinching of the urethra and an improperly placed, bladder where they can't properly evacuate that causes the buildup. It's not the calcium itself. Now, lowering the calcium is a treatment for rabbits that already have this condition, but to be honest, the correct treatment for rabbits that are undercut and pinched is putting them in a crock pot.